There are mornings that look ordinary from the outside, but they can become the turning point of an entire life. The sun rises. The streets begin to move. People wake up, reach for their phones, check their messages, look at their problems, think about their bills, worry about their future, remember what went wrong yesterday. And before their feet even touch the floor, they have already allowed the world to tell them how they should feel. But what if I told you that the first moments of your morning are more important than you have been treating them? Not because a particular hour has magical power. Not because waking up early automatically makes you successful. But because your morning reveals something profound about what you are allowing to govern your life. Before the noise begins, there is a moment before the notifications, before the arguments, before the pressure, before the deadlines, before the opinions of other people. There is a quiet space. And what you do in that space can begin to shape the person you become. Let me ask you something. What is the first voice you listen to every morning? Is it God's voice? Is it your fear? Is it your phone? Is it your past? Is it anxiety? Is it the voice of comparison? Is it the voice saying, I'm already behind? Think about that. Because sometimes we spend our entire day asking God to give us peace, while we begin our morning by feeding ourselves everything that steals peace. We ask for direction while beginning the day distracted. We ask for strength while beginning the day mentally defeated. We ask for wisdom while allowing anger to become our first emotion. We ask for God's favor while neglecting the character necessary to carry what we are praying for. And maybe the deepest question isn't, how do I get God to bless me? Maybe the deeper question is, who am I becoming while I wait for the blessing? Because there are things you can ask God for that you are not yet prepared to carry. You can pray for influence while your character is still fragile. You can pray for wealth while your discipline is still weak. You can pray for opportunity while your habits are still destroying your preparation. You can pray for a better relationship while refusing to become a better person. You can pray for a new season while continuing to live according to the habits of the old one. And this is where the morning becomes powerful. The morning is not simply the beginning of your schedule. It is a meeting place between who you were and who you are becoming. And there are 5 things I want you to understand. But I don't want you to hear them as 5 religious chores. I want you to hear them as principles for becoming the kind of person who can recognize God's direction, obey it, prepare for it, and remain grateful when it arrives. Because God's favor is not something you manipulate. You cannot bargain with heaven. You cannot perform a ritual and force God to give you what you want. Favor is not a vending machine. Prayer is not a transaction. Faith is not a formula. But there is a way of living that positions your heart differently. There is a way of beginning the day that makes you more attentive to God, more disciplined with your choices, more courageous in difficulty, more grateful in abundance, and more prepared when opportunity appears. And the first thing begins before you touch your phone. It begins with stillness. You have to learn how to become still. That sounds simple. But for many people, it is incredibly difficult because silence exposes what noise hides. A person can spend an entire day running from their thoughts, music in the morning, videos while eating, musts while walking, podcasts while driving, social media while waiting, television at night. And then they wonder why they cannot hear themselves think. Sometimes you are not exhausted because life is asking too much from you. Sometimes you are exhausted because your mind has not had one peaceful moment all day. Let me tell you about a man I once imagined sitting in a small kitchen at 5:30 in the morning. His name doesn't matter. His situation does. He had a family. He had responsibilities. He had bills. He had a job he didn't love but needed. Every morning he woke up already angry. His alarm would ring. He would silence it. 5 more minutes. then another alarm, then another. He would reach for his phone before getting out of bed. Other people's success, other people's vacations, other people's opinions, and within 15 minutes, his mind had already visited 20 different lives except his own. Then he would rush, coffee, shower, work, traffic, pressure. And by the time he reached his workplace, he felt as though the day had already defeated him. One morning, something small happened. His phone battery had died. No alarm, no notifications, no social media. Nothing. He woke up naturally because sunlight entered the room. For a few minutes, he simply sat there. And for the first time in years, he heard his own thoughts. He realized something uncomfortable. He wasn't only tired, he was afraid. Afraid that his career was going nowhere. Afraid that his children would remember him as a stressed out father. Afraid that he had wasted years. Afraid that he wasn't becoming the man he once promised himself he would become. The noise had been protecting him from those questions. And when the noise disappeared, the questions appeared. Now listen carefully. This is where many people make a mistake. They think the answer is to run back to the noise. But sometimes the discomfort you feel in silence is not evidence that silence is bad. Sometimes it is evidence that something inside you needs attention. That is why the first morning practice is not simply waking early. It is giving God your first attention. Before the world gets your mind, give God your attention. Sit, breathe, pray, be still. You don't need complicated words. You don't need to perform. You don't need to impress God. Talk honestly. God, thank you for giving me another day. Give me wisdom today. Help me control my words. Help me recognize what is right. Give me strength to do what I know I should do. Protect my heart from bitterness. Show me where I need to change. That last prayer may be more powerful than the prayer you usually make. Show me where I need to change. Because most people pray for God to change their circumstances. Very few pray for God to change them. We say, God, change my boss. God, change my finances. God, change my relationship. God, change my situation. But what if the deeper prayer is, God, change my character so I can handle whatever situation comes next? Think about it. If your character remains the same, a new environment may only produce the same problems in a different location. If you remain impatient, more money won't automatically make you peaceful. If you remain undisciplined, more opportunity won't automatically make you successful. If you remain insecure, more attention won't automatically make you confident. If you remain bitter, a new relationship won't automatically heal your heart. Sometimes the blessing you are asking for requires a version of you that has not yet been developed. And that is why morning stillness matters. It gives you a chance to meet yourself before the world starts demanding things from you. But there is another layer. You don't only need stillness. You need surrender. Because prayer without surrender can become a negotiation. God, here's what I want. Please make it happen. But surrender says, God, here's what I want, but I trust you enough to accept that your wisdom is greater than mine. That is harder, because sometimes you are praying for a door that God knows would destroy you. Sometimes you are begging for something that looks like success, but would cost you your peace. Sometimes the relationship you are desperate to keep is the relationship you need to release. Sometimes the opportunity you think you need is not the opportunity that will develop you. Sometimes the delay is not punishment. Sometimes the delay is preparation. And if you don't learn surrender, you can become so obsessed with receiving what you asked for that you miss what God is trying to teach you while you wait. There was a woman who spent years praying for a particular career opportunity. She applied. She interviewed. She was rejected. She tried again, rejected, again rejected. She became discouraged. She began to believe that maybe she wasn't talented enough. Then one day she received an opportunity she didn't want. It paid less. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't the position she had imagined, but she accepted it. And that small position introduced her to people, skills, and responsibilities that eventually prepared her for the very opportunity she had been praying for. Years later, she looked backward and realized something. The rejection had not been wasted time. The waiting had been training. The door that closed had redirected her. Now, be careful here. I'm not telling you every disappointment is secretly a blessing. Life is more complicated than that. Some things hurt. Some losses are real. Some seasons are painful. Faith does not require pretending that pain doesn't hurt. But faith gives you another question to ask. Not only, why is this happening to me? But what can this season produce in me? That's a different question. And the morning is the perfect time to ask it. Because before you face today's difficulty, you can decide how you will carry yourself through it. That leads us to something deeper. The second thing you must do every morning is fill your mind before the world fills it for you. Your mind is not an empty room. Something is always entering. Something is always shaping your expectations. Something is always teaching you what to fear, what to desire, what to admire, what to chase, and what to believe. If you don't intentionally choose what enters your mind, the world will choose for you. And the world is very good at selling you dissatisfaction. Open your phone and someone has a better house. Someone has more money. Someone looks better. Someone is traveling. Someone is getting married. Someone is becoming successful. Someone is announcing an achievement. Someone is living the life you think you should already have. And suddenly your ordinary morning feels like failure. Nothing changed in your life. Only your comparison changed. That is dangerous because comparison can make gratitude feel like poverty. You can have food and feel poor. You can have a family and feel alone. You can have health and feel unlucky. You can have a roof and feel unsuccessful. You can have another day and still complain that it isn't the life you wanted. So every morning, before the world tells you what you lack, remind yourself of what you have. Add something that strengthens your faith. Reflect on Scripture if that is part of your spiritual life. Write down what you are grateful for. Think about the people who matter. Think about the opportunities still available. Think about the lessons you have survived, because gratitude changes attention. And attention changes experience. You don't see life exactly as it is. You experience life through what you repeatedly pay attention to. If you train your mind to search for problems, you will find problems everywhere. If you train your mind to search for opportunities, you begin noticing possibilities. If you train your mind to search for reasons to complain, the day gives you plenty. If you train your mind to search for reasons to be grateful, you begin seeing what you previously ignored. That doesn't mean you deny reality. It means you stop allowing reality's difficulties to become the entire story. Let me ask you something. What would happen if you spent the first 10 minutes of every morning reading something that made you wiser instead of 10 minutes consuming something that made you anxious? What would happen after 30 days? After 6 months? After a year? This is the compound effect. People underestimate small choices because small choices do not look powerful. One page doesn't look powerful. One prayer doesn't look powerful. One disciplined decision doesn't look powerful. One morning without scrolling doesn't look powerful. But your life is not built by isolated moments. It is built by repeated moments. A brick doesn't look like a house, but enough bricks placed consistently become a house. A decision doesn't look like a character, but enough decisions become character. A morning doesn't look like a life, but enough mornings become a life. And the same principle works negatively. One excuse seems harmless. One skipped prayer. One unnecessary hour scrolling. One promise broken to yourself. One day of procrastination. One compromise. One lie. One angry response. One decision to stay comfortable. None of these seems catastrophic, but repeated often enough, they become identity. That is why you need to be careful with what you call small. Small things become big things when repeated. The person who constantly says, "I'll start tomorrow," is not merely postponing a task. They are practicing postponement. The person who repeatedly says, "I can't," is not merely describing a moment. They are rehearsing helplessness. The person who repeatedly says, "I don't have time," may eventually become someone who has never learned to manage attention. And the person who wakes each morning and says, "God, guide me today," then takes responsibility for their choices, is practicing alignment. That's powerful. But there is something even deeper. Prayer does not replace action. Faith does not excuse laziness. Trusting God does not mean refusing to prepare. There are people praying for harvest while refusing to plant. They want the result without the process. They want the promotion without the skill. They want financial freedom without financial discipline. They want confidence without keeping promises to themselves. They want a strong body without changing their habits. They want peace without changing the environment that continually feeds chaos. You have to understand the difference between faith and passivity. Faith says, "I trust God, therefore I will do my part faithfully." Passivity says, "I'll do nothing and call it trust." Those are not the same. The third thing you must do every morning is decide what deserves your attention today. Not everything deserves you. Not every message deserves a response. Not every argument deserves your energy. Not every opportunity deserves your yes. Not every temptation deserves your consideration. Not every problem deserves your entire morning. A distracted person is often not a person without ability. They are a person whose ability has been scattered. Imagine taking a magnifying glass and focusing sunlight onto one point. The light becomes powerful. But spread that same energy over a large area and it loses intensity. Your attention works the same way. Scattered attention produces weak results. Focusized attention produces power. So each morning, ask, what is the most important thing I can do today? Not 10 things. The most important thing, what, if completed, would make today meaningful? Maybe it is finishing the work you've been avoiding. Maybe it is having an honest conversation. Maybe it is studying. Maybe it is exercising. Maybe it is working on your business. Maybe it is applying for the job. Maybe it is fixing your finances. Maybe it is spending real time with your children. Maybe it is apologizing. Maybe it is finally starting the project you have talked about for 6 months. But whatever it is, identify it. Because clarity reduces emotional noise. I once heard about a man who had been carrying a business idea for years. He talked about it constantly. He researched. He watched videos. He bought notebooks. He made plans. He told friends. But he never launched. He thought he needed more knowledge. Eventually, someone asked him a simple question. How many hours have you spent doing the actual thing? He couldn't answer because he had spent years preparing to begin instead of beginning. That question exposed something. His problem wasn't lack of information. It was fear. He was afraid that once he acted, reality could judge him. As long as the idea remained in his head, it was perfect. The moment he acted, it could fail. So he protected his dream by never testing it. Maybe you've done something similar. Maybe there is something in your life you keep calling waiting for the right time. But underneath the waiting is fear. Fear of rejection, fear of embarrassment, fear of being judged. Fear of discovering you are not as good as you hoped. And sometimes the hardest part of discipline is not doing the work. It is facing what the work might reveal. That's why morning discipline is bigger than productivity. When you wake up and do the thing you promised yourself you would do, you are teaching your mind, I can trust myself. That sentence matters. Self-respect is not built by telling yourself that you're valuable. It is built by repeatedly acting in ways that demonstrate that you value yourself. Every promise you keep to yourself adds evidence. Every promise you repeatedly break removes evidence. If you say you're going to wake up at a certain time and you consistently do it, something changes internally. If you say you're going to exercise and you show up, something changes. If you say you're going to study and you study, something changes. If you say you're going to stop wasting your mornings and you stop, something changes. You begin to trust your own word. And confidence grows from evidence, not fantasy, not affirmations alone. Evidence. This is why discipline can become spiritual. Because discipline teaches you stewardship. You have been given time. What are you doing with it? You have been given abilities. What are you developing? You have been given relationships. How are you treating them? You have been given another morning. How are you using it? And maybe you have been asking God for more while ignoring what is already in your hands. Think about Moses. He was asking what he could do. And the question came back to what he already had. A staff. Something ordinary. Something he had been carrying. Sometimes we spend years asking for something extraordinary while neglecting the ordinary thing already available to us. Your notebook, your phone, your skill, your body, your time, your relationship, your education, your experience, your ability to learn, your ability to begin again, your ability to say no, your ability to apologize, your ability to work, your ability to pray. Don't despise ordinary tools. Great changes often begin with ordinary obedience. And this brings us to the fourth thing. Every morning you must examine your heart, not just your schedule, your heart. Because you can become extremely productive while becoming internally unhealthy. You can accomplish goals while becoming arrogant. You can become wealthy while becoming empty. You can become influential while losing your integrity. You can become successful while becoming someone you don't respect. So morning reflection needs a question deeper than, what do I need to get done? Ask, who am I becoming? That question changes everything, because there are goals that are not worth achieving if achieving them requires destroying the person you wanted to become. Imagine yourself 5 years from now. You have achieved the money. You have the recognition. People know your name. Your business succeeded. Your career worked, but you are angry all the time. Your family doesn't know you. Your health is gone. Your sleep is destroyed. Your peace disappeared. You have everything you once prayed for, except the ability to enjoy it. Would that be success? Now imagine another future. Maybe you don't become famous. Maybe you don't become extremely wealthy, but you become disciplined. You become wise. You become peaceful. You become reliable. You become generous. You become courageous. Your family trusts you. Your word means something. You have learned to control your emotions. You have developed useful skills. You can sleep at night knowing you did your best. Which future feels richer? We need to stop measuring life only by what can be displayed. Some of the greatest victories will never appear on social media. Getting out of bed when depression of circumstances tells you to stay down. Refusing to answer an insult with another insult. Walking away from temptation. Keeping a promise nobody knows about. Saving money instead of spending it to impress people. Studying when nobody is watching. Praying when nobody applauds. Doing honest work when dishonesty would be easier. Forgiving someone who will never know you forgave them. These are invisible victories. And invisible victories build visible character. But examining your heart also means dealing with resentment. There are people carrying yesterday into today. Someone betrayed you. Someone rejected you. Someone embarrassed you. Someone abandoned you. Someone underestimated you. Someone lied about you. And now every morning begins with the emotional weight of an old conversation. You wake up in a new day carrying an old person. Why? because you keep rehearsing what happened. You replay it. You imagine what you should have said. You imagine what they should have done. You construct arguments in your mind. And the person who hurt you may be sleeping peacefully while you continue paying for the event every morning. Forgiveness does not mean what happened was acceptable. Forgiveness means you refuse to let someone else's wrongdoing control the rest of your life. And sometimes you have to pray, God, I cannot carry this anymore. Not because they deserve your forgiveness, because you deserve freedom. That is different. And this is where spiritual maturity begins to become practical maturity. You cannot ask for peace while continually feeding resentment. You cannot ask for a clean heart while rehearsing hatred. You cannot ask for wisdom while refusing correction. You cannot ask for God's direction while insisting that your way is the only acceptable way. Surrender is not weakness. Sometimes surrender is the strongest thing a person can do. Now let's go deeper. There is a difference between asking God to bless your plans and asking God to guide your plans. Those are not the same prayer. God, bless what I decided, versus God, help me decide wisely. The second prayer requires humility because you have to be willing to hear no. You have to be willing to change direction. You have to be willing to wait. You have to be willing to admit, I was wrong. That sentence can save a life. I was wrong. Some people would rather lose 10 years than admit they chose badly. They stay in careers they hate. They stay in relationships that destroy them. They maintain habits that hurt them. They continue businesses that no longer make sense. They refuse advice, not because they don't know better, because their pride won't allow them to change. Humility gives you permission to become a beginner again. And every morning is an opportunity to become a beginner again. You don't have to be the person you were yesterday. Yesterday can inform you without imprisoning you. You made mistakes. Fine, learn. You wasted time. Fine, change. You failed. Fine, study the failure. You disappointed yourself. Fine. Become someone you can trust again. You lost an opportunity. Fine, prepare for the next one. Don't turn a mistake into an identity. You are not your worst decision. But if you keep repeating your worst decision, eventually it becomes your pattern. And patterns become futures. This is why the fifth thing you must do every morning is make a deliberate decision to obey what you already know is right. Not what is easy, what is right. Because sometimes you already know. You know you need to stop. You know you need to start. You know you need to apologize. You know you need to forgive. You know you need to leave. You know you need to study. You know you need to save. You know you need to exercise. You know you need to stop wasting hours. You know you need to make the call. You know you need to tell the truth. You know. And the problem isn't always information. Sometimes the problem is obedience. We keep asking for a new sign when we haven't followed the last instruction. We keep asking for clarity while ignoring what is already clear. Imagine a person standing at a crossroads praying, God, show me which direction to go. And the answer is obvious. But they keep praying because they don't like the direction. Sometimes we don't need more clarity, we need more courage. And courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is movement in the presence of fear. You can be afraid and still act. You can be uncertain and still take the next step. You can feel unqualified and still learn. You can feel weak and still refuse to quit. You can be tired and still do the most important thing. This is where the morning becomes a battlefield, not a battlefield against other people. A battlefield against the part of you that wants immediate comfort. The alarm rings. Comfort says, stay in bed. Discipline says, get up. Your phone says, scroll. Wisdom says, think. Your fear says, don't try. Courage says, take one step. Your old identity says, this is just who you are. Faith says, you can become different. Every morning, you are voting. You are voting for a future. And most people don't understand that they think their future will be determined by one giant decision. But usually the future is built quietly, 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, one choice, one refusal, one habit, one conversation, 1 hour of focused work, one morning of prayer, one evening of preparation, and then repetition. The compound effect doesn't ask whether you feel inspired. It simply keeps adding. If you compound discipline, your life changes. If you compound excuses, your life changes too. If you compound gratitude, your emotional world changes. If you compound resentment, your emotional world changes too. If you compound learning, your ability expands. If you compound distraction, your attention weakens. If you compound saving, your financial position changes. If you compound unnecessary spending, your financial position changes too. There is no neutral repetition. You are becoming something. The question is what? Now imagine your life 1 year from today, same morning, same phone, same excuses, same distractions, same unfinished goals. Same anger, same procrastination, same fear. What does that future feel like? Don't look away from it. Imagine it. 1 year. Nothing dramatic happens. That's the danger. You don't collapse. You don't lose everything. You simply remain the same. And another year passes. Then another. One day you realize that the life you feared would happen has happened. Not because of one terrible decision, but because of thousands of tiny decisions you never considered important. Now, change the picture. 1 year from now, you wake up differently. You pray before reaching for your phone. You have learned to control your attention. You read, you exercise, you work on the skill, you save, you say no to distractions. You stop explaining yourself to people who don't understand your direction. You have become more patient, more disciplined, more thoughtful, not perfect, different. 3 years later, the difference is enormous. And 5 years later, you may barely recognize the person you used to be. That is the power of small, faithful decisions. But I want you to notice something. The morning routine itself isn't the miracle. The transformation is happening inside the person practicing it. The routine is simply the training ground. A person who prays every morning but remains cruel has missed something. A person who wakes at 5 but spends the entire day wasting time has missed something. A person who reads scripture but refuses to forgive has missed something. A person who writes goals but refuses responsibility has missed something. The external practice must eventually reach the internal character. Otherwise, you are only performing. And God is not impressed by performance that hides the heart. This is why your morning should contain honesty. God, I'm angry. God, I'm afraid. God, I'm jealous. God, I don't understand. God, I'm tired. God, I don't know what to do. Those prayers may be more honest than pretending to be strong, because strength begins with truth. You cannot heal what you refuse to admit. You cannot change what you refuse to see. You cannot surrender what you refuse to name. So sit in the morning and tell the truth. Then ask for wisdom. And after asking, listen. Not necessarily for an audible voice. Sometimes wisdom arrives through scripture, sometimes through conscience, sometimes through circumstances, sometimes through wise people, sometimes through consequences, sometimes through the quiet realization that you have been avoiding something you already know. Pay attention, but don't confuse every emotion with divine direction. Fear can feel like intuition. Desire can feel like destiny. Impatience can feel like urgency. Ego can sound like confidence. That's why wisdom requires reflection. And that's why you should not make every major decision from an emotionally exhausted state. Calm down, pray, think, wait, when necessary, then act. There is another enemy of God's favor that people rarely talk about. Entitlement. Entitlement says, I deserve this. I should have it now. Why them and not me? I've worked hard, so I should get what I want. But gratitude says, I am thankful for what I have, and I will faithfully develop what has been entrusted to me. Those are completely different mindsets. Entitlement makes blessings feel insufficient. Gratitude makes ordinary things meaningful. Entitlement asks, what else? Gratitude asks, what can I do with what I already have? And here's something strange. People who learn to steward small things often become prepared for larger things. If you cannot manage 1 hour, why would more hours solve your problem? If you cannot manage a small amount of money, why would more money automatically fix you? If you cannot keep one promise, why would more opportunities make you reliable? If you cannot control your words in a small disagreement, why would greater influence make you wiser? The question isn't only, how much do I want? The question is, how well do I handle what I already have? That is stewardship. And every morning gives you something to steward. Time, attention, energy, words, thoughts, choices. You don't control everything, but you control something. And maturity begins when you stop obsessing over what you cannot control and become faithful with what you can. You cannot control what people think about you. You can control how you behave. You cannot control whether someone rejects you. You can control whether rejection teaches you. You cannot control the economy. You can control how you manage your money. You cannot control the past. You can control what you do with its lessons. You cannot control every outcome. You can control your preparation. You cannot control tomorrow. You can control today's choices. And that is enough to begin. Let me take you somewhere deeper. There is a version of you that exists only because you kept making excuses. And there is another version of you waiting behind decisions you have not yet made. Both are possible. The question is which one you feed. Every morning, your old identity wakes up with you. It whispers, you're tired. You've tried before. It won't work. You're too late. People will laugh. You don't have enough. You don't know enough. Someone else is better. Just do it tomorrow. And if you listen long enough, the voice becomes familiar. Then familiar starts feeling true. But familiar is not the same as true. Just because you've failed before doesn't mean you will always fail. Just because you were undisciplined doesn't mean you must remain undisciplined. Just because your family struggled with something doesn't mean you cannot change the pattern. Just because you made bad decisions doesn't mean you cannot become wise. Your past explains you. It does not have to imprison you. But transformation requires repetition. You cannot become a new person through one emotional morning. You become new through repeated choices. That is why some mornings will feel powerful and others won't. There will be mornings when prayer feels easy. There will be mornings when your mind is distracted. There will be mornings when you don't feel motivated. There will be mornings when you question everything. Don't build your life around feelings. Feelings matter, but they are not always instructions. Discipline means you can continue doing what matters even when emotion is absent. That's maturity. A person who only works when inspired will have an inconsistent life. A person who only prays when desperate will struggle to develop depth. A person who only exercises when motivated will eventually stop. A person who only studies when interested will remain limited. Consistency is what turns intention into identity. And there is a spiritual beauty in consistency, because every morning you say, in effect, I will show up again. Not because you are guaranteed an easy day, because you have decided that your life deserves faithful effort. Now think about the person who hurt you. Think about the opportunity you lost. Think about the financial mistake. Think about the rejection. Think about the year you wish you could recover. Think about the relationship that ended. Think about the dream that didn't happen. You can spend your mornings staring backward, or you can use your mornings to build forward. You cannot rebuild yesterday, but you can redeem tomorrow through what you do today. And sometimes the greatest miracle is not getting back what you lost. Sometimes it is becoming so wise through the loss that you no longer need to repeat it. The man who lost money learns discipline. The woman who experienced rejection learns resilience. The person who wasted years learns urgency. The person who trusted the wrong people learns discernment. The person who failed learns humility. The person who was ignored learns self-reliance. Pain can become a teacher, but only if you listen. Otherwise, pain simply becomes bitterness. And bitterness is pain that has not been processed into wisdom. That is why morning reflection matters. Ask, what did yesterday teach me? Not, why did yesterday embarrass me? What did yesterday teach me? Maybe you learned that you need boundaries. Maybe you learned that you need better preparation. Maybe you learned that you cannot keep pleasing everyone. Maybe you learned that your spending habits are dangerous. Maybe you learned that your attention is being stolen. Maybe you learned that you need to apologize. Maybe you learned that you need to stop waiting for permission. Good. Carry the lesson. Leave the unnecessary shame. There is a difference between conviction and condemnation. Conviction says, this needs to change. Condemnation says, you are hopeless. One creates movement, the other creates paralysis. If you believe you are hopeless, why try? But if you believe you can change, even slowly, you have a reason to take the next step. And that is why you must guard the words you speak to yourself. Your mind listens. If every morning you say, I'm useless, I'm behind, I'm unlucky, I'll never succeed. Eventually your behavior begins to follow the story, but don't replace it with empty fantasy. Don't stand in front of the mirror and say, I am perfect. You know you aren't. Instead say, I am responsible, I am learning, I can improve, I can take the next step. I don't have to solve my whole life today. I can be faithful with today. That's powerful because it is believable. You don't need to feel unstoppable. You need to become dependable. You don't need to feel fearless. You need to become courageous. You don't need to know the entire path. You need enough light for the next step. And sometimes that is how guidance works. You don't get the whole map. You get the next step. You want 10 years. You are given today. You want the destination. You are given a direction. You want certainty. You are given faith. And perhaps that is because if you knew everything in advance, you might never develop the strength required for the journey. Think about a muscle. It becomes stronger through resistance. Character works similarly. Patience needs waiting. Courage needs uncertainty. Discipline needs temptation. Forgiveness needs injury. Humility needs correction. Resilience needs difficulty. Wisdom needs experience. You cannot develop qualities in theory. Life gives you situations in which those qualities can be practiced. So when difficulty arrives, don't only ask, how do I get out? Ask, what quality is this situation demanding from me? Maybe patience, maybe courage, maybe restraint, maybe discipline, maybe faith, maybe honesty, maybe humility, maybe endurance. And now your difficult season has another meaning, not an easy meaning, not a painless meaning, but a meaningful one. There is a man who loses his job. He wakes up the next morning ashamed. He doesn't tell his friends. He doesn't want his family to know how afraid he is. For several days, he stays in bed longer. He scrolls. He worries. He tells himself the market is bad. Then one morning, he gets up early. He prays. He writes down everything he knows how to do. He calls 3 people. He applies for 2 positions. He studies for 1 hour. He exercises for 30 minutes. He updates his skills. Nothing miraculous happens that day. No job offer. No dramatic breakthrough. But something changes. He stops being a victim of the event and becomes a participant in his recovery. That is the turning point. The job loss didn't change. His position did. And sometimes that is what faith looks like. Not pretending everything is fine, but refusing to surrender your agency because something went wrong. You can cry and still work. You can be disappointed and still pray. You can be afraid and still move. You can be tired and still take one step. You can have questions and still have faith. That combination is powerful. And now I want you to imagine something else. Imagine meeting yourself 5 years from now. That future version of you is standing in front of you. You ask, what did you do with your mornings? And your future self answers. If you spent 5 years scrolling, delaying, complaining, and waiting for motivation, what do you think that person would say? Maybe you had more time than you realized. You kept saying tomorrow. You were waiting for your life to change while repeating the habits that kept it the same. That would hurt. Now imagine another future, a stronger version of you, not perfect, but transformed. That person says, thank you for getting up when you didn't feel like it. Thank you for learning. Thank you for saving. Thank you for praying. Thank you for walking away from what was destroying you. Thank you for keeping those promises nobody knew about. Thank you for not giving up during the season when nothing seemed to be happening. That's the future you are building. Quickly this morning. Tomorrow morning, the next morning, and the morning after that, you don't have to become that person today. You have to make the kind of decision that person would have made. That's enough. But there is another danger. Sometimes people become disciplined for the wrong reason. They become obsessed with proving people wrong. I'll show them. I'll become successful so they regret underestimating me. I'll get rich so they know they were wrong. I'll become powerful so nobody can disrespect me again. That can produce temporary energy, but it cannot produce lasting peace because your entire life becomes a response to people who hurt you. You are still controlled by them. Real freedom sounds different. I don't need revenge. I need growth. I don't need to prove myself to everyone. I need to become faithful to what I know is right. I don't need applause. I need character. I don't need everyone to understand. I need clarity. That's a different kind of strength, and perhaps God's favor is less about making everyone admire you and more about making you capable of carrying what truly matters. Because applause can make you arrogant. Silence can make you disciplined. A season of obscurity can teach you what attention never could. There are people who became great because nobody was watching. They had to learn. They had to struggle. They had to work without applause. And when the opportunity finally arrived, they were ready. Preparation often happens in private. The public sees the result. They don't see the mornings. They don't see the sacrifices. They don't see the times you wanted to quit. They don't see the books. They don't see the failures. They don't see the prayers. They don't see the discipline. They see the moment, but the moment was built by thousands of invisible moments. So don't envy somebody's harvest if you are unwilling to respect their seasons of planting. And don't despise your own planting season because nobody applauds it. Some seasons are for becoming, not displaying, becoming. That word matters. Because perhaps your prayer is not being answered in the form you expected because you are being prepared in a way you didn't understand. You asked for influence. You received responsibility. You asked for wealth. You received discipline. You asked for confidence. You received challenges. You asked for leadership. You received people who tested your patience. You asked for wisdom. You received mistakes. At first you say, why is this happening? Later you may say, oh, now I understand. But you may not understand immediately. And that is where faith becomes faith. If you could see the entire explanation, you wouldn't need trust. Now let's return to the morning. What happens if tomorrow you wake up and refuse to let your phone be the first thing that owns your mind? What happens if you sit quietly? What happens if you pray? What happens if you read something that strengthens you? What happens if you write down 3 things you're grateful for? What happens if you identify the one thing that matters most? What happens if you ask, who do I need to become today? And then you live accordingly. One morning won't transform everything, but it could transform your direction. And direction repeated becomes destination. You don't need a perfect morning. You need an intentional morning. Don't turn this into another reason to feel guilty. If you wake up at 7, you haven't failed because you didn't wake at 5. If you wake at 5 and spend the next 3 hours doing nothing useful, the clock hasn't made you better. The goal is not a number on an alarm. The goal is alignment. Some people need 5. Some need 6. Some have responsibilities that make another schedule more realistic. The principle is simple. Before the demands of the world take over, create space to think, pray, prepare, and choose. That's what matters. And don't let perfection become another form of procrastination. I missed one morning, so I'll restart Monday. No, retard the next morning. I broke my diet. Continue at the next meal. I wasted today. Use the next hour. I failed this week. Don't waste another week feeling guilty. The enemy of transformations is often not failure. It is the belief that failure means you should stop. Failure is information. Get back up. And this is where self-respect grows again. Not because you never fall, because you learn to rise. There is a version of strength that looks like never breaking. And there is a deeper version that looks like rebuilding. Anyone can feel strong when life is cooperating, but what happens when the plan fails? What happens when the person says no? What happens when the money disappears? What happens when the opportunity goes somewhere else? What happens when your timeline is delayed? That is where your morning practice becomes more than a routine. It becomes an anchor. You return to prayer. You return to truth. You return to responsibility. You return to what you can control. You return to the next right action. That is stability. And stability is powerful because a person who can remain grounded while circumstances change becomes difficult to destroy. Not because nothing hurts them, because they know where to return. Let me ask you another question. What would happen if you stopped asking every morning, how can I have a good day? And instead asked, how can I be good to what this day requires of me? Maybe today requires patience, maybe courage, maybe hard work, maybe forgiveness, maybe boundaries, maybe learning, maybe silence, maybe speaking up, maybe accepting that something is over. The day doesn't have to feel good to be valuable. Some of your most important days may be difficult. A hard conversation can save a relationship. A rejection can redirect a career. A financial limitation can teach discipline. A failure can expose arrogance. A lonely season can teach self-knowledge. A delay can develop patience. A difficult morning can reveal how much control you actually have over your response. So don't measure every day by comfort. Measure it by growth, integrity, faithfulness, and meaning. Now think about your children, if you have them, or the people who look up to you. What are they learning from your mornings? They may not listen to your speeches, but they watch your habits. They see how you handle stress. They see whether you keep promises. They see whether you blame everyone else. They see whether you apologize. They see whether you work. They see whether you pray. They see whether you give up. Your life is teaching, even when you aren't speaking. And that should make us more intentional. Because legacy isn't only what you leave behind. Legacy is what you reproduce in others. Your discipline may become someone else's discipline. Your courage may become someone else's courage. Your kindness may become someone's memory. Your integrity may become someone's standard. Your faith may become someone's reason to keep going. And that is bigger than personal success. Now, perhaps you have been waiting for some dramatic sign from God. Maybe you think, when the big opportunity comes, then I'll become disciplined. But what if discipline is how you prepare for the opportunity? Maybe you think, when I have more money, I'll become generous. But what if generosity is learned with what you have now? Maybe when life becomes easier, I'll become peaceful. But what if peace is practiced while life is difficult? Maybe when I become successful, I'll become confident. But what if confidence is built through keeping promises before success arrives? You don't become ready after the opportunity. You become ready before it. And this is why ordinary mornings matter. The morning is rehearsal. Your day is the performance. Your life is the accumulated result. If you cannot manage the first hour, don't expect the 10th hour to magically become disciplined. If you cannot control your attention in the morning, don't expect to remain focused when the pressure rises. If you cannot tell yourself no in private, don't assume you'll have discipline when temptation becomes public. Character is built before it is tested. The test only reveals what has already been practiced. And maybe you have been asking, why do I keep failing when the pressure comes? Because pressure does not create character. Pressure reveals it. That is why you train before the battle. You pray before the crisis. You save before the emergency. You study before the exam. You practice before the performance. You build relationships before you need help. You build character before responsibility arrives. You prepare before opportunity knocks. This is wisdom. And wisdom is one of the greatest forms of favor. Because sometimes the greatest blessing isn't getting what you want. It is knowing what to do when you get it. Imagine giving a person $1 million who has never learned financial discipline. The money may disappear. Give a disciplined person the same amount, and the story can be different. Give an immature person influence, and they may destroy relationships. Give a mature person influence, and they may build people. Give an insecure person attention, and they may become addicted to approval. Give a secure person attention, and they may use it to serve. The container matters. The blessing and the capacity must meet, and capacity is built slowly, quietly, repeatedly. So when you pray in the morning, don't only pray for more, pray for capacity. God, make me wiser. Make me more disciplined. Make me more patient. Teach me to handle money. Teach me to handle influence. Teach me to handle disappointment. Teach me to handle success without losing myself. Teach me to recognize people. Teach me to recognize opportunities. Teach me to recognize distractions. Teach me when to speak and when to remain silent. Those prayers can transform a person because they shift your attention from acquisition to development. And development changes everything. Now I want you to think about the one habit you know is stealing from your future. You know which one it is. Maybe you stay up too late. Maybe you scroll too much. Maybe you spend money impulsively. Maybe you procrastinate. Maybe you complain. Maybe you keep checking what other people are doing. Maybe you consume more than you create. Maybe you avoid difficult conversations. Maybe you keep returning to something you know is unhealthy. Don't tell yourself you will change everything tomorrow. Choose one and understand why it exists, because habits have roots. You don't always defeat a habit by fighting the behavior. You have to understand the need underneath it. Why do you scroll? Boredom? Loneliness? Avoidance? Anxiety? Why do you procrastinate? Fear? Perfectionism? Confusion? Why do you overeat? Comfort? Stress? Why do you overspend? Validation? Impulse? Why do you constantly seek approval? Insecurity? Once you understand the root, you can address the real issue. This is why self-awareness matters. And morning reflection gives you a place to develop it. Ask yourself, what am I avoiding? That is a powerful question, because sometimes the thing you avoid most is the thing that could change your life. You avoid opening the bank account because you're afraid of the numbers. You avoid applying because you're afraid of rejection. You avoid exercising because you don't want to confront your current condition. You avoid studying because it reminds you how much you don't know. You avoid the conversation because you're afraid of conflict. You avoid silence because it forces you to hear yourself. But avoidance creates temporary relief. and long-term pain. Action creates temporary discomfort and long-term freedom. That's one of the great exchanges of life. Comfort now or freedom later. Discomfort now or regret later. Every morning you choose, not perfectly, but repeatedly, and your choices accumulate. Think about 5 years. 5 years of choosing comfort. What does that produce? 5 years of choosing disciplined discomfort. What does that produce? 5 years of learning, 5 years of saving, 5 years of exercising, 5 years of praying, 5 years of building, 5 years of improving your relationships, 5 years of saying no to distractions. You don't need to be extraordinary today. You need to be consistent enough that 5 years from now, the compound effect has done its work. And there is something beautiful about that. Because it means you don't have to solve your entire life tonight. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have all the answers. You need tomorrow morning. Then the next one. Then the next. One morning at a time. One decision at a time. One promise at a time. One prayer at a time. One act of courage at a time. And maybe that's why the morning is such a powerful symbol. Every morning, life tells you, you have been given another opportunity to respond differently. Yesterday's mistakes are still real, but yesterday is no longer available for action. Today is. And you have to respect today, because some people keep waiting for the perfect future while neglecting the only moment they can actually control. The present. Don't waste today rehearsing yesterday. Don't spend today fearing tomorrow. Stand where your feet are. Pray from where you are. Work from where you are. Learn from where you are. Build from where you are, and let God handle what is beyond your control. That is not passivity. That is perspective. You do your part. You release what isn't yours. You prepare, you trust, you act. You learn, you adjust, you continue. And there will be days when you don't see results. Those days matter. Maybe more than you realize. Because when you work without immediate reward, you discover whether you were committed to the process or addicted to applause. The person who only continues when results appear will quit during the invisible season. But the person who understands compound growth knows that absence of visible results does not necessarily mean absence of progress. A seed beneath the soil looks like nothing. But something can be happening where you cannot see it. Still, don't use that metaphor to excuse inactivity. A seed has to be planted. You still have to act. You still have to work. You still have to practice. You still have to make wise decisions. Faith and effort belong together. You plant, you water, you tend, and you recognize that you cannot control every part of the harvest. That is humility. You are responsible for your effort, not every outcome, and learning that distinction can save you from enormous anxiety. You can prepare and still be rejected. You can love someone and still lose them. You can work hard and still experience setbacks. You can make good decisions and still face difficult circumstances. That doesn't mean effort is useless. It means life is not a machine where inputs always produce predictable outcomes. Your responsibility is faithfulness. And faithfulness is powerful because it remains meaningful even when the outcome is delayed. Imagine a farmer. He doesn't dig up the seed every morning to see if it is growing. He trusts the process while continuing to work. You need that kind of patience, but not passive patience, active patience. The patience to keep learning, the patience to keep preparing, the patience to keep your character intact, the patience to keep your faith, the patience to continue without becoming bitter. That is difficult, and that is why it develops you. Now imagine that tomorrow morning you wake up with no guarantee that your problems will disappear. No guarantee the phone will ring. No guarantee the money will arrive. No guarantee the relationship will be repaired. No guarantee the opportunity will come. No guarantee the world will treat you fairly. But you still get up. You still pray. You still choose gratitude. You still focus. You still work. You still tell the truth. You still protect your character. You still take the next step. That is strength, not because you know what will happen, because you know what kind of person you intend to be while it happens. And maybe that is the deepest morning decision of all. Not what will happen to me today, but who will I be today? Will you be reactive or intentional? Will you be distracted or focused? Will you be bitter or teachable? Will you be fearful or courageous? Will you be passive or responsible? Will you be controlled by your impulses or guided by your values? Every morning, these choices wait for you, and nobody can make them for you. People can advise you. People can encourage you. People can pray for you, but eventually you have to choose. And perhaps you have been waiting for someone to rescue you from the responsibility of becoming. Nobody can do that. Even if someone gives you an opportunity, you must still become capable of using it. Even if someone gives you money, you must still learn to manage it. Even if someone loves you, you must still learn to love well. Even if someone opens the door, you must still walk through it. Responsibility is not punishment. Responsibility is power. Because if everything is someone else's fault, then your life is in someone else's hands. But when you say, I have something to work on, you reclaim power. I can improve my habits. Power. I can manage my attention. Power. I can learn. Power. I can apologize. Power. I can say no. Power. I can begin again. Power. And perhaps that is one of the greatest things a morning can give you, a beginning. Not a guarantee, a beginning. The day may still be difficult, but you can enter it differently. You can enter it with prayer instead of panic, with gratitude instead of comparison, with clarity instead of distraction, with discipline instead of impulse, with surrender instead of control. And those choices begin changing the person who makes them. Now, if you are listening to this while lying in bed, I want you to notice something. There may be a small voice inside you saying, tomorrow. Listen to it carefully. Not because it is wise, because it is familiar. Tomorrow. That word has stolen more potential than failure ever could. Tomorrow I'll start. Tomorrow I'll pray. Tomorrow I'll exercise. Tomorrow I'll save. Tomorrow I'll study. Tomorrow I'll apologize. Tomorrow I'll change. And tomorrow becomes next week. Next week becomes next month. Next month becomes another year. And one day, the person you could have become is standing somewhere in your imagination, asking why you kept postponing them. Don't wait for a perfect morning. Don't wait for perfect motivation. Don't wait for a crisis. Don't wait until you're older. Don't wait until you lose something important. Begin with the next morning, and if you miss it, begin again. There is no shame in beginning again. There is wisdom in it, because your life doesn't need a dramatic announcement. It needs a pattern, a better pattern. And patterns are built quietly. No applause, no audience, no dramatic music. Just you, your alarm, your thoughts, your prayer, your choices, and God. That is enough. But I want to take you one layer deeper before we stop here, because there is something people often misunderstand about favor. They imagine favor as a life without difficulty. But look at the people we admire most. Their lives were not free from difficulty. Their favor, if you want to use that language, did not necessarily remove every obstacle. Sometimes it gave them strength to walk through the obstacle. Sometimes it gave them wisdom to avoid one. Sometimes it gave them the right person at the right time. Sometimes it gave them another chance after failure. Sometimes it gave them endurance when the situation remained unchanged. Sometimes the blessing wasn't escape. It was capacity. And capacity changes the way you pray. Instead of God, make my life easy. You begin praying, God, make me strong enough to handle what you have placed in front of me. Instead of remove every challenge, you begin saying, teach me what this challenge requires. Instead of make everyone respect me, you begin saying, Make me respectable through my character, whether they notice or not. Instead of, give me success immediately, you begin saying, teach me to build something that can last. Those prayers require maturity. And maturity rarely arrives overnight. It is developed in mornings, quiet mornings, difficult mornings, mornings when you don't feel like it, mornings when you're disappointed, mornings when the previous day didn't go well, mornings when nobody knows what you're carrying. You still get up, you still breathe, you still pray, you still choose. And perhaps years from now, when you look backward, you will realize that the greatest changes did not happen on the days when everything went perfectly. They happened on ordinary mornings when you decided not to abandon yourself. When you decided to keep your word, when you decided to forgive, when you decided to learn, when you decided to stop waiting, when you decided that your attention was valuable, when you decided that your future deserved better than your impulses, when you decided that your faith needed to become more than words. And maybe tomorrow morning, the world will still be exactly as loud as it was yesterday. The problems may still be there. The bills may still exist. The unanswered message may still be unanswered. The opportunity may still be uncertain. The dream may still be far away, but you can meet the day differently. You can sit before the noise. You can give God your first attention. You can fill your mind with truth. You can choose what deserves your focus. You can examine your heart. You can act on what you know is right. And then you can walk into the day without demanding that everything go your way. You can simply ask for enough wisdom to handle the next moment well, and then the next, and then the next. Because sometimes the life you are praying for is being built in the life you are currently living. Not somewhere else, not after everything changes. Here, in the ordinary, in the waiting, in the discipline, in the small decisions nobody sees. In the morning, when you would rather stay in bed. In the moment when you could react, but choose restraint. In the hour when you could scroll, but choose to build. In the conversation when you could lie, but choose truth. In the temptation when you could compromise, but choose character. In the disappointment when you could become bitter, but choose wisdom. In the uncertainty when you could panic, but choose faith. And perhaps that is where the deepest transformation begins. Not when you finally get everything you wanted, but when you become someone who can remain faithful even before you get it. Because then your life is no longer controlled entirely by outcomes. Your peace is not rented from circumstances. Your confidence is not borrowed from applause. Your discipline is not dependent on motivation. Your faith is not dependent on convenience. Your character is not dependent on whether anyone is watching. You become grounded. And when you become grounded, something changes in the way you walk through the world. You stop chasing every door. You stop explaining yourself to everybody. You stop comparing your timeline. You stop panicking over every delay. You stop treating every rejection as a verdict on your worth. You stop believing that one bad day means a bad life. You stop demanding immediate results. You start paying attention. You start listening. You start preparing. You start becoming. And perhaps one morning you will realize that the person you were begging God to help has become the person who can now help others. The person who once needed encouragement becomes an encourager. The person who once feared rejection becomes courageous. The person who once wasted money becomes disciplined. The person who once procrastinated becomes dependable. The person who once lived distracted becomes focused. The person who once carried bitterness becomes forgiving. The person who once hated mornings begins protecting them. And you may look back and realize that the miracle was not one spectacular morning. It was hundreds of ordinary mornings that nobody celebrated. Hundreds of decisions. Hundreds of prayers. Hundreds of times you began again. And there will still be mornings when you fail. There will still be days when you lose focus. There will still be moments when fear wins. There will still be times when you disappoint yourself. But the story doesn't have to end there. You can return to stillness, return to truth, return to prayer, return to discipline, return to gratitude, return to responsibility, return to the next right step. And when you don't know what to do with the whole future, do something with the morning. Protect it. Use it. Give it meaning. Because tomorrow morning, before the world tells you who you should be, there will be a quiet moment when you can decide who you are willing to become. And perhaps in that quiet moment, you will finally understand that you were never being asked to control everything, only to be faithful with what was placed in your hands, your time, your attention, your character, your choices, your response, your faith, your work, your heart. And maybe the next chapter of your life will not begin with a dramatic event. Maybe it will begin with something so ordinary that nobody else even notices. The alarm rings, your eyes open, the room is quiet, the phone is within reach, the old habit is waiting, the old identity is whispering, and then you pause, you breathe, you remember what matters, you turn your attention toward God, and for the first time in a long time, instead of asking, "What can I get from this day?" you ask, "What can I faithfully give to this day?" And that question can take you somewhere you have never been, because the morning is still there. The decision is still there. The next step is still there. And so is the person you are becoming.